Hey everyone, and welcome to another HOI4 modding lesson from the Iron Workshop. In this lesson, we'll be learning how to create new decisions and missions in HOI4, and as with previous lessons, we will be using some files from the Steam Workshop. And the reason for that is because decisions and missions are actually very complex, and it would be impossible for me to teach you how to create an exact combination of every type of mission and decision, because it depends very much on what is it exactly that you want to create. So we'll be covering the basics of how to create these, and I highly encourage you to experiment and to try things out after you finish this lesson, because that is the only way for you to get comfortable with this mechanic and to understand how to use it properly to create what you want to create in HOI4. Now I will have the link to the DMTF mod in the video description, so please go ahead and download this mod from the Steam Workshop. On the Steam page you'll also have the location of the files which I will be talking about throughout this video, so make sure that everything works correctly and that you can access these files. So with all of that said, let's get on with the lesson after the intro. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do after you've downloaded the mod and you have everything installed on your computer is that I want to go over some of the basics of missions and decisions. These are things that you need to understand before you actually start writing the code, and it could potentially save you a lot of time and maybe some frustration with things that are not obvious. So let's first start with a clear distinction between missions and decisions. So missions are just decisions with timers. Whenever you include a timer, that decision is now a mission. That is not something that I invented, that just seems to be the approach that the developers took with this mechanic. So every time that you see a decision that has a timer, it's considered a mission. I'm not sure why, I don't know why, but that's just how these things work. And it's quite important that you understand that, because I will be using these two terms and I want you to understand why I'm saying missions or decisions. Next, it's very important that you understand that both missions and decisions have to be included inside of a category. Let me just open these files in here. So this is the mod that you downloaded from the Steam Workshop, and if we go to Common Decisions, in here you'll have a folder called Categories, and inside of that you'll have the Categories file. Now these categories are critical for your decisions and missions to appear. Every decision and every mission needs to be assigned a category. If it does not have a category, you will get errors in your game log, and the decision or the mission will not display, will not show. So it's quite important that you attach your decision and mission to a category. Another thing which is very important to understand is when you are testing missions and decisions, specifically missions, it works partially. So sometimes the game will show you the change immediately, but other times it will not show it. And it's important that you understand this, because you might think that maybe you are doing something wrong, and that is why your mission or decision was not updated in the game. But that's not always the cause, and sometimes if you just restart the game, you will have the thing that you updated showing up properly when it did not, in case you changed it while you're in the game in debug mode. Another thing that you should always have in mind is that whenever you have a mission, whenever you have something with a timer, a decision with a timer, these timers will reset themselves every time you save a mission or a category or a decision file, right? So for now, for example, this timer is 4 days, but if I go ahead here and I just change something small like this and I save it, these timers are reset and now it's 5 days. And it's very important that you understand that this happens for all the countries in the game, not just the country that you're currently loaded into. So that can have some weird results in case you see that the AI is suddenly doing something which is supposed to take more time or less time. And that might just be happening because the timers were restarted. That is why, unfortunately, one of the best ways to test missions that have timers is to just restart the game, because otherwise things might go wrong. Another thing that you need to understand is that graphics, whenever you update graphics on decisions and missions and categories, they will not update automatically in the game live. You will need to restart your game for the graphics to appear correctly in case you change them. Again, this is not something you doing something wrong, that is just the way the game handles this mechanic and how it displays the graphics. Another important thing that you need to know is that the localization for the decisions, missions, and the categories will only update if you close and open the decisions panel. This panel, you will need to close it and open it for the localization to appear properly. For example, here we have a category called simple category. And if I were to add a name for it, like this, for example, you see that it has not changed, right? But if I were to close and reopen this decision panel, you see that now it has been updated. So that is another thing that you need to keep in mind when you added these. And one last thing, it might be obvious for some of you, definitely for those of you who are more experienced, but I will say it anyway. The categories, missions, and decisions IDs cannot have spaces in them. For example, this is an ID of a category. You cannot put spaces in there. If you want to create a space, you will need to use an underscore, okay? You have to use it this way. If you put spaces, things will go terribly wrong, and you do not want to do that. All right, so this covers the stuff that you need to look out for when you create missions, decisions, and categories for both of these. Now I want to talk a bit about how we create localization and graphics for these. First of all, let's talk about localization. So how do I create the localization for my decisions, missions, and categories? Because obviously I don't want to leave them like this with these underscores and looking weird like that. So in the case of my template file, I've put up all the localization inside the localization folder in a file called decisions, localization L English. Now, one important thing that you need to know is that you can't split this into different files. However, it's very important that you use the same format. So the best thing to do is to just copy this file, create a new copy of the same file, and then just rename it to whatever you want it to be. But if you are creating an English localization, you have to put the L underscore English, like this. Okay? If you don't do that, the game will not recognize your localization and it will not work. Obviously, if you're localizing in another language, you need to put the name of that language. All right. Now, if you just want to include the localization, you just need to put in here the ID of your decision or category or mission. Let's take a look. For example, we have a decision here called simple decision. And if we look in the game, it's called simple decision, just like this. So all I need to do is to copy this ID, open the localization file, put it in here, and just follow the format that already exists. And then just give it the name, for example, like this. And as I said, we need to close and reopen this window. And you see that the localization now appears. You can also include descriptions. So whenever the player hovers over your decision or mission, he can have a description for it. To include a description, you just need to take the ID again, add the description code like this, and again, follow the format, put your description inside, wherever it may be, and reopen the panel. And now we have our description showing. And it's the same thing for missions, decisions, and for the categories. For example, here I have a description for a category and it shows up in here. Next, let's talk about the graphics. So I've included some graphic files in this package, and the graphic files themselves are located in GFX, interface, decisions. And in here you'll find three files. one file for the category image, so that is what we see in here, one file for the category icon, so this is this icon that shows up in here whenever a new category is created, and one more file for the decision icon, so this is the icon that you see in here. And of course you can open these files and just edit them in paint.net or GIMP or whatever software you want to use. If you want to include new files, you will need to create an interface entry. So let's see how we can do that. If we go back to the folder, in here you have the interface folder. So we just need to open this GFX file. And in here you see the entry for these three files. So if I want to create a new file, I just copy an existing entry, I give it the name. Please make sure to include the GFX underscore at the beginning. That is required for the game to properly process these files. So you just include this, you give it the name of this graphic file, then you just give it the path to the file, right? So for example, like this, .dds, you save it, and then you just put the name in here inside of the decision in icon, or in case of categories, here in icon, or if it's a picture, here in pictures, and then your picture will show up. Now let's take a closer look at the category files. So the category file contains three types of categories. We have a simple category, which looks like this, right? So this is just some category with a name, nothing special. And underneath it, we have the decisions that are associated to this category. Next, we have a category with a picture. So in case you want to include a picture that shows up like this on the side, you just need to include the picture parameter and obviously link or put the name of the picture from the GFX file that I talked about earlier. Another thing that you might notice here is that you have something called priority. And just like it says, priority determines how high this category will be shown in the decisions panel. So the higher the number, the higher it will show in the panel. And obviously, if you want your decision to show up before all other vanilla game decisions and categories, you will need to assign it a higher number. Another type of category is the category that contains the map icon. This is something that's used, for example, for the Spanish Civil War in La Resistance, for those of you who have played it. So it looks something like this, and it has this magnifying glass icon. And if you click on it, it will take you to the states that you are defining in here. So see here, it says state 318. So in this case, it's Haiti. And you can actually expand the list of these states. So for example, if I were to put another state 519, for example, like this, and I were to click it again, then it will just scroll through these states with the order that you put them, right? So first this one, then this one, and you can expand the list on and on. You can also put the localization entry in here. So if you wanted to say something else in here, you can put up your own localization, obviously in the localization file. And you can also set the zoom level. So when I actually click on this, you see that it zooms into the state, and I can determine just how closely it will zoom on this state. So for example, if I change this to 500, you see that it zooms out very far. And if I change it back to 100 and I save it, you see that it zooms much closer, so you can adjust that as you wish. All right, next, let's go over the normal decisions, and then we'll talk a little bit about targeted decisions. All right, so let's take a look at a simple decision and see what we have in here. So first of all, we have the ID of that decision. Obviously, if I want to reference that decision, then that is what I will use. If I want to create localization, that is just how the game identifies this particular decision. Next, we have the icon for this decision, and obviously you can change this icon whenever you wish. just put the name of the icon from the .gfx file and it will show the new icon. As I said previously, you might have to reload your game for the new icon to show up correctly. Next, we have available. So available determines what conditions I have to meet in order to click this decision. Let's just take a look at the game. You see currently I can't click this envelope, but that is because I don't have the 10 political power. However, if I were to give myself political power, you see that now I can click this decision, but I can limit that just by putting some kind of a condition in here. For example, has political power 100. And if my country has more than 100 political power, then I will be able to click this decision. Let's just change it to 900 and you see that I cannot click it, and there's a tooltip now telling me why I can't click this decision. Now you can obviously limit this to other countries as well. So for example, if I wanted to check the political power of another country like Germany, I can just do it like this. So only if Germany has more than 900 political power, I will be able to click this decision. Next, we have fire only once. So this tells me if this decision should be available only once in the game, right? So if after I click this decision and it disappears, I can tell the game that I don't want this decision to ever appear again. And if this is set to yes, then that will happen. If it's set to no, then the decision will reappear automatically instantly, or I can actually determine how many days should pass in the game until this decision appears once more. After that, we have visible. So what makes this decision visible to both the player and the AI? It's very important that you remember that in order for the AI to execute decisions and missions, it has to be visible to the AI. And sometimes this is something that can really be a little bit frustrating, but if you want to make sure that the AI can see the decision, you can just tag switch. So for example, if I created a decision for Germany and I want to make sure if they see it, then I can just type tag Germany and just open their decision panel and see if they can see the decision. After that, we have cost. So this is the cost in political power and the amount of political power that will be taken from the country that's executing the decision. In this case, it's 10. Obviously, you can increase or decrease this number. Next, we have the effects of this decision. So what will happen after I execute the decision? Okay, so let's just take a look at that. I will reduce the cost to 0. I will remove this available trigger. And in here, I'll put add political power 500. And I'll save it. So now what happens is that once I click this decision, I get 500 political power, right? So right now I have 500, and once I click it, I have 1000. Excellent. So this is the stuff that I can do with this complete effect. And obviously you can also give it to other countries. As I said before, if you just put Germany like this in here, it will give the political power to Germany, and you can have a variety of effects. You can get the list of effects that you can put in decisions on the HOI4 wiki. I will have a link to that in the description of this video as well. And one last thing that we have to look out for in these simple decisions is the AI will do. So these are the modifiers for the AI and how the AI calculates if it should execute or not execute this decision. Now, talking about AI logic can actually make this video very long and very frustrating, so I won't go into it too much. If you really want to dig deeper into how the AI is programmed to execute decisions, I suggest that you look at decision files from the vanilla game, and in there you can see how the developers have implemented various ways to make the AI do a decision or not do a decision. Needless to say that if the factor is 0, then the AI will not execute it. If it's 1, or obviously if it's 100, the AI will execute this decision. and you can actually add other factors as well. The way that you can add these modifiers is the following. So you need to type modifier, open a new bracket. Let's say has political power more than 50, add 50. So what will happen now is that if the AI has more than 50 political power, the modifier will grow by 50 and obviously will tell the AI to use this decision. If they do not have more than 50 political power, it will stay at 0 and they will not execute this decision. So you can put up more modifiers like this. For example, you can put up another one, and this way you can really go deeper into handling the logic of when the AI should execute your decisions or missions. Now let's take a look at the targeted decisions. So this is something that people have asked me a couple of times. How do you put the little flag on the decision? So the little flag is actually put by one line of code called target trigger. So let's see how a targeted decision looks in the game. If I open the game here right now, you see that I have simple targeted decision and there's a United States flag in here. And that is because I have in here set from tag USA. So this tells the game that the particular decision is aimed towards the United States. And I can actually do effects on the United States. And I can target the United States or other countries. And I can actually target a lot of countries at once. So if I wanted to target every country in Europe, I would do something like this. Okay, now you see that I have every country that has its capital in Europe showing as a targeted decision. Now, in most cases, you would not want to do something as extreme as this, because as you can see, it takes up a lot of slots in the decisions and makes you scroll quite a bit. But this is something that you can do, and there are a lot of ways to filter countries in the game. Maybe this is something that I will create a separate lesson on in the future, but this is what targeted decisions allow you to do. So let me just put this back specifically to the United States. And in these targeted decisions, you can actually do effects on all of these countries that are targeted by this decision. Previously, when I had all the countries in Europe, if I were to do something like this, so right now you see that when I click this decision, it will give the United States 50 political power. But if I still had all of those countries targeted from Europe, all of these countries would get 50 political power at once. So targeted decisions can be very useful. However, you do need to be careful when you use them because they can be a little bit resource intensive. So use them carefully and try not to spread them out to too many countries, because that could create a little bit of chaos and some performance issues. Of course, it all depends on the scope of your work. Now, there's really not a lot new to say here, because as you can see, the structure of these decisions is very, very similar. So it uses a lot of the stuff that I've already talked about, and the only difference in here is the target trigger. So that is how you can use targeted decisions to target specific countries. And now I want to talk a bit about creating missions with timers. So in the folder of the mod that you downloaded, you will see that inside the common decisions, you have another file called timed decisions. So these are all the decisions that are actually missions. And I just want to go over this so that we understand some of the differences between these, because there are a few types of these, right? So let's take a look at a simple timeout mission. So we have the icons. Here we have something days mission timeout. So this determines how long the mission will appear here when it's first started. And as you can see, it's set to 5 days. if I were to resave the file, it will reset it, and you see that this mission will go for 5 days, and when it finishes, it can go into 2 phases. It can be completed or it can be failed. And what determines if a mission is completed or failed? What you put in the available section. So for example, if I were to put in here, country exists Australia, like this, and we just let it run for a little bit. Okay, you see that the mission has been failed, because in this case, what's in available has to be not true for the mission to be considered a successful mission. So if I were to put something like this in here, and we'll let the timer roll again, we'll just let it finish. You see that now the mission has been completed because it's not true that Australia does not exist. Yeah, it can be a little bit complicated, but after you try these for a little bit and you just do a little bit of trial and error, you'll see exactly how it works and it will make a lot more sense to you. Now, after the mission is completed, we can put an effect. So in here, in the timeout effect, that is what will happen if the mission has failed. Another effect that you can put here is the complete effect. And this determines what will happen if the mission is completed, right? So if it's completed, I can get political power, I can have a civil war, whatever you want, right? And if it's failed, then I can have a different effect. So you can play with these effects, very specific to the set of conditions that you put in available and what makes a mission be either successful or a failed mission. Next, I want to talk about missions with a remove effect. So these missions can actually have a third stage, which is the remove stage. And what this means is that if the mission was successful, if it's completed, or if it's failed, it will enter another phase where during this phase you can apply a modifier to a country. So let's see what this means in the game itself. So I'm just going to put in here something like this, stability weekly. Now, obviously, I don't expect you or anyone to remember these by heart. You will be able to find these modifiers in the HOI4 wiki, and I will have a link to that in the description of this video as well. This is a modifier, okay? It's not an effect. So these modifiers will only last while the mission is in remove phase. And you can set the amount of time that the mission will be in remove by changing the amount of days here. So we have days remove 5. So the mission will be removed for 5 days. Let me just save it so that we can take a closer look at what it means. So if we take a look at this mission, you see that it's going to time out, and now it's completed. But after it's completed, I now get this bonus weekly. So I will now get for 5 days plus 10% stability for each week. Now, obviously 5 days is not a week, so I'll probably won't get it, but you get the point. In here, if I don't have a remove effect, you see that it's just timed out, it's completed, and it's gone. It's not really doing anything beyond that. But here, because it's a mission that has a remove effect, that is why we get this thing where we can put another modifier that will play out while the mission is in the days remove. Now, a last type of decision that I want to take a look at is the on-map decision. So you've probably encountered these in some mods and in the vanilla game as well. There are decisions that only show up on the map, and this is the way that you create them. So let's see what's different about this decision that makes it appear on the map. So we have the icon. In here we have something called on map mode, and it's set to map only. This means that this decision will only appear on the map, but where on the map it's going to appear. So this determines where the decision will appear. it says highlight states and the number of the state. Now, previously you've seen that we can add a couple of states in the categories. Unfortunately, in here, you can't really do that. You can only have one state highlighted. This is some kind of a limitation that Paradox have implemented into the system. I'm not sure why, maybe it's for performance reasons, but you can't just put another state in here, for example, like this, and expect it to work. That will not work. You need to have only one state listed in here. So this means that the icon for this decision will appear above state number 318. Now, if you need the state IDs, you will need to have the game in debug mode, and then you can find them just by hovering over the states and holding your Control and Alt key, and in here you have the state ID, and that is the number that you need. So let's just see how this thing looks in the game. In order for these to appear, the decisions panel has to be open, otherwise they're not displayed. And this is it here, on map decision. Now I can obviously change its localization, its icon, whatever. This is the cost, and you see that it's highlighting this state, which is state 318. So these are the on map decisions. They're not very different. They also have a complete effect. They can also have a remove effect. They can have a timeout effect. Whatever you want. They don't have to be decisions. They can be missions as well, which means that they can have timers. And of course, you can combine these with the category that allows us to have an on-map area. This is something which was done in the Spanish Civil War quite a lot. Now, the Spanish Civil War is very complex and it involves a lot of stuff working together to give you this whole experience. But now that you know how to create some of these, you can start and begin to understand how the Spanish Civil War mechanics were implemented. All right, so these are all the decisions and missions that we have to talk about. And now I just want to go ahead and talk about some extra syntax. If something isn't clear or you tried something and it's not working, please let me know in the comments and I will do my best to help you. However, I do want to emphasize the following. Decisions do require quite some time to experiment in order to get them right. There's really no way for me in one single YouTube video to make life completely easier for you and just make everything work. It is quite possible that in your first attempts, your missions and decisions will not work. Maybe the icons will not change. Maybe the localization will be weird. That's totally fine. That's really part of modding. Do give yourself the chance to try things out, experiment, try to change the files back to what they were, start again. So do all of these things and eventually things will work out for you. Obviously, if they didn't, please let me know in the comments and I will try to help you. All right, so we're going to move on to the extra syntax where I will explain how to do some localization tricks with the decisions and missions, and also how you can use decisions and missions as a debugging tool. But for those of you who are not staying, thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next lesson. Alright everyone, now let's talk about some extra syntax that we can use to add some flavor to our decisions and missions. So one thing which you will no doubt encounter if you start creating these is that oftentimes when you create effects for your decisions and missions, sometimes it can get way too overcrowded, right? So if I added a lot of effects in here, the way that the game displays them is not the best and it can get quite confusing. So what you can do, you can actually create your own custom effect tooltips. And the way that you do it is the following. So let's say that right now I do want to add 500 political power, but I don't really want that particular tooltip to be shown to the player. So what I can do, I can type custom effect tooltip equals, and now I can do one of two things. I can actually type the tooltip right in here. So for example, player will get 1000 pp. Yay. 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 Excellent. And I can save it. And if we take a look at the complete effect now, you see that it shows up properly. But it still shows me the political power plus 500. So I do want to hide that. So to hide that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the following syntax, the following code, hidden effect. And I will just make sure to put what I want to hide inside of this hidden effect, right? So it goes from here, from this bracket, all the way up to here. And I can actually add like 100 of things here, right? So I can go like this and they will not see any of it. I can save it. And you see now that I only see my custom tooltip that I've created. But they will still get the 500, 500, 500 political power. Great. But you do need to be aware of a limitation when you use tooltips like this. The limitation is that there is a limit to the amount of characters that you can put here without going to a localization key. Localization keys are the references here that you put in the localization files for various localization. And in here, you'll probably be able to put about 100 characters. I'm not really sure about the limit. I haven't had the time to test that properly. But if you are going above that, for example, you have a very long tooltip or whatever, what you can do, you can just export it to the localization entry. So let's put it like this. For example, decision effect, yay. So now I'm going to take this text from here. I'm going to put it in here, and I'm just going to put the localization key in here, and it will have exactly the same result. So if I close and open it, you see that I have the same effect tooltip showing up. So it very much depends on how much text you want in your custom effect tooltip. And obviously you can use the hidden effect to hide all other types of information that maybe the player doesn't really need. Great. So this is one type of tooltip that you can use. Another type is to change what the player sees as the conditions, right? So for example, in here, I do want the player to have, let's say, has political power more than 900, but let's say that that's not really what I want the tooltip to show. I want it to say something else. So what I can do in here, I'm going to use the following code, custom trigger tooltip. I'm going to open new brackets. In here, I'm going to put tooltip equals. And again, I can either put the tooltip directly in here or to put it in a localization key. I'm just going to type whatever. And I'm actually going to put this thing inside of this custom trigger tooltip. And if we save it and go into the game, you see that now it doesn't show the has political power tooltip. It only shows the tooltip that I've included. And you can actually put a lot of these, right? So you can put another one that says something else, and it will show you both of these as two separate conditions. So there are a lot of things that you can do with this to make things more neat, maybe more clear, and it's highly recommended that you use these custom tooltips to make things more clear for the player. All right, one last thing that I want to talk about is how you can use decisions as a debugging tool. So personally, I've encountered a lot of cases where I need to check something about a certain country, but I don't have a solution to do that with the game console. So what I've done is that I've created my own debugging decisions where I put the stuff that I want to check inside of the available section, inside these triggers. So for example, if I'm adding a country flag, if I'm sticking a country flag on a certain country, and I want to check if that flag was actually applied from something completely different in the game, for example, a focus or effect or whatever, I can just put it in here. For example, let's say Germany has country flag, my country flag. And I save it. And if I just take a look at here, it says that it doesn't have it. Okay. Now there are no other ways for me to check this visually except for this. And this can help you quite a lot when you're debugging your own mods, no matter how big or small. And there are a lot of things that you can't really check with the console or other tools that are available to us, but the decisions can actually help you do that. So do use that as a debugging tool, and it can help you quite a bit. You can actually make them appear only when you're in debug mode. To do that, I recommend that you put two conditions. First of all, you make sure that root is not AI, so that the AI doesn't mess with these decisions and that the AI doesn't see them. Obviously, if the AI can't see these decisions, then it can't play around with them, it can't trigger them, which is good. And another condition that you can put is debug yes. So that means that only if the game is in debug mode, these decisions will be available. So obviously a player that's playing your mod and doesn't need to see all the debug information, he will not be able to see it. Only if he turns his game to debug mode, which most players don't actually do. Hopefully this lesson helped you. As I said at the beginning of the lesson, decisions can be very complex, and we only covered the surface with these. Alright, so let's wrap this up. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video, lesson, or tutorial on the Iron Workshop. Bye bye. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. The algorithm and me will be very happy. Here are more videos I make. If you like my stuff, consider subscribing to be notified when new content is available. The Iron Workshop lives and thrives thanks to the continued support of my Patreons. If you're willing and able, you can support me on Patreon for just $1 and get access to exclusive and early content. See you around.